There's a little slideshow. Today's title is How to Motivate Buyers in Today's Market. And this came up with JJ, actually. He was texting me something a couple days ago. And, I was like, hey, what should I talk about? I don't have a topic in my head as of right now. And it all really stemmed from last week. We had happy hour and he was doing some short little videos with Alan Grulick. And he was talking about the 2-1 buy down. All right. And I've heard of this with the new builds. We'll get into it in a little bit. But then I talked to Mark Koehl, who's with us today, who's a lender at Legacy Mutual. And he's like, yeah, we have a 2-1 buy down program. We can talk about that. So he'll be talking about that and Seller Concessions and some different options. Here's the biggest thing is right now, buyers are scared, right? Like, I mean, everybody's like, oh my God, we're going to pump the brakes. It's 6.5% interest rate. This is insane. And I love the meme. I think JJ posted it of like this big old dog bulked up that says back in 1980, I was ready to pay 18% for my mortgage payment. And now all the millennials now trying to buy houses at 6.5% are freaking out. All right. And it's like, it's just a sign of the times because everybody's like, oh, well, it was 3% not long ago, but it has gone up pretty quickly. But before we get into that and talk all about that, do we have any wins with what's going on? Isaiah is like a brand new agent. Mark, do you have any wins with your business that you want to share and kind of pump everything up? Colin, you got anything, or Norma? Feel free to unmute and share a win.
So I was at a wedding this week, and one of the old TCU Catholic guys that we went to church, we reconnected, and he lives downtown Dallas. But he said a couple months ago he was looking at a house but didn't have a realtor. So he said he's waiting for the market to go down, which I don't think it is. But
Yeah.
But he's very wealthy, so he's gonna be looking at a house soon, hopefully.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Very good. And that's what it is. It just amazes me when you get out and about and around people and you just strike up conversation. You don't even ask them about real estate, but you just start shooting the shit. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I'm actually thinking about buying. It's like, okay, great. Let's set up a meeting. Let's do something. So cool. Hopefully that turns into something really good. Keep plugging away at the Facebook marketplace while they allow us to do it. Anybody else have a win that they'd like to share?
I think a big win for me is this time has kind of caused, a lot of conversations about your systems. Like everyone has to go back to the basics now and like to the real basics of being in sales and like what's going to be your method. How are you going to meet people? How are you going to create new relationships? How are you going to follow up with those? It gets overwhelming. So it's like this time has caused our entire industry, real estate agents, lenders, and everybody to kind of go back to the basics, recreate the systems that are going to work for you now. And like, I feel like a lot of clarity that I didn't have when things were like just churning along. And so like, I'm ready for it. Like it's going to go back, it's just the cycles of the business. And so now I feel like when business begins to pick up even more as all of this settles, I feel really ready for that, so it's kind of been a nice, for lack of a better way to say it, a little break to go back and look at all those.
No, I like that. My wife and I sat down last night and started kind of sketching out the business plan and going, hey, I'm dropping the ball on this and this. Can you help me? And just getting more organized and really getting your database in place and really having a very strategic plan. And Neil Mathwick talks about it, just simplify and amplify. You don't have to be doing 1,000 things, but if you do 5 things really well, really consistently, and your people can count on you for that, that's going to make a larger impact than doing all kinds of chasing stuff. So awesome. Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in? Oh, look, Ricky joined us. Ricky Ray's here. All right, Val is here. Awesome. Does anybody else have a win before we move on to the nuts and bolts of today? And Rebecca just joined us. Thanks for being here, guys. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, as a reminder, some new people have joined us today. Feel free to turn on your mic at any time and stop me. Mark will be talking as well. So if you have a question, I'm probably not really looking for the raise of hand. So just say, hey, Tony, and I'll stop talking and let you jump in. So feel free to interact. All right. But today's topics, all right. Number one, we're the expert. All right. You control the narrative. If we allow our people, like think about your database and the people that you're loving on. I should have changed the picture. I guess I forgot this one. But we're the expert, right? Well, we need to control the narrative and not let the national media tell our people how terrible the real estate market is right now, and that it's going to crash and burn and it's all over and home values are coming down and all that. We need to be the expert and provide the numbers. All right. So I'm making a plan personally to do more video content. I did a short little 3-minute YouTube video update to put on my email that I sent out yesterday. And I plan on doing more of that going forward, especially wrapping up the end of this year as the fourth quarter just started. But we got to educate our people on what's really going on here locally. Because even when you get those national reports, all of the reports are saying San Antonio is still going up. All right. People are still moving here. Prices are still going up. All right. So that's not, well, we're not the norm for other parts of the country. We've talked, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but seller concessions, we're going to mention that. I know when I started in 2019, paragraph 12A was a very popular paragraph of like how much money you're going to request. If you've done real estate in the past year or two, you're going, what the heck is paragraph 12A? I've never filled that out. It's always been zero, right? But you can actually ask for money from the sellers to cover closing costs and cover other expenses. And we'll let Mark kind of cover some of that in a second. We're also going to talk a little bit about the 2-1 buy down program. The first time I heard about this was a new build incentive, right? To where, hey, you know, you can do the 2-1 buy down and we can lower your interest rate 2 points in the first year, 1 point in the second year, et cetera. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, Mark will give us a greater insight as he's the expert lender in the room with us today. And then I'm sure you've been bombarded just like me with a lot of new build emails, you know, talking about all of their incentives. I just moved into a Pulte home up here close to Timberwood Park, and I pulled up their incentives, and houses that were priced at like 486 are now slashed down to like 459. All right. So it's like, okay, well, now prices are being lowered. I see a bunch of like 5-6% interest rates. And realizing, you know, I'm still working with a handful of buyers right now that are hungry, but they have so many more options than they did 6, 12, 18 months ago. All right. But I'm sure y'all worked with buyers in the past year or so that's like, if you don't put an offer in within the next hour, this house is gone. Like we need to put in an offer right now to even stand a chance, and we have to pay for everything. But now it's like, hey, you know what? We backed out of that. And now that you're ready, that house is still available if you want it. So that's kind of cool. The ball is back in our court a little bit as a buyer's rep. So some things to consider as we're getting into today. So again, a little bit about being the expert, right? I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of hearing the media telling us the sky is falling and the real estate market is going to crash. You know, I don't know for sure what's going to happen, but I know that it's going to get a little bit tougher. And it already has, right? I'm sure we've seen the effect of it, and it's probably going to continue to be like this and maybe get even a little bit tougher than it has in the past year or so. But I remember a year and a half, I'd just be like driving and not even talking to my people. And then all of a sudden somebody would just call me and said, hey, I want to buy a house. It's like, boom, freaking deals just fall into my lap. All right. And I wasn't even really working for it. But now like Mark Koehl was talking about, like we have to get back to doing the work, putting in the time, you know, reestablishing those relationships and really nurturing them. and everything's going to be okay. Again, we talked about San Antonio is not like the national market. All right. People are still moving here. Prices are still going up. Be the resource of facts in the local market. All right. You pull up, and I try to do a decent amount of real estate reviews, which we'll talk about. But it's like, man, each neighborhood is so specific to their market, right? The market of Stone Oak is different than Timberwood Park, which is different than Alamo Ranch. You can't really just give a blanket statement for San Antonio market. So show them the numbers, right? This is what's been selling. This is price changes specific to your neighborhood. There's a lots more inventory to choose from. Show them that, right? Here's all of the houses that sold back then, and here's all the houses that are available now. Buyers don't have all of the power, but they have a lot more power than they did in the past. I was literally scrolling, and I'm going to hand this off to Mark here in a second. I was scrolling Facebook a second ago, not long, and I came across a realtor posting this from KW. And I follow her, and this is a pretty cool little, I'm not sure where she got this from. It was somebody, KW Rockwall, looks like in the top right corner. But cost of buying a house, list price 400. And it was kind of interesting. I haven't run the numbers exactly, so if this is wrong, it might be wrong, but it's kind of an interesting comparison side by side. But a $400,000 house, it was not unusual for somebody to pay 10% above asking price. I was telling all of my buyers, hey, if you want to compete, think about 8 to 10% above asking price. So they're paying 40,000 over plus $5,000 closing costs. So they're really paying 445 for this 400. Yeah, they had a lower interest rate, same down payment, but their mortgage payment came out to this. Again, I think this is right. I didn't run the numbers, but $45,000 paid over list price compared to today, right? That same $400,000 house, they're not having multiple offers, so they're not having to overpay. A lot of the times, closing cost is being picked up in paragraph 12A. All right. So they're not having to come up with that extra cash out of pocket. Yes, their interest rate that they locked is higher, but because of the closing costs of $14,000 and seller concessions to buy it down to 4.75, right? They still have the same down payment, but look at their mortgage payment, right? And I think we can use this 31,000 saved up front, 26,000 saved over 10 years. We can use this scenario in starting conversations with our people, right? Does any of that make sense? Do we have any questions? Hopefully all of that sort of makes sense to you. It definitely caught my eye, and I was like, that's really interesting. And I bet you if you kind of made this your own and shared this on your social media or in an email to your people, this kind of conversation, this kind of information starts conversations and goes, wait a second, maybe it is a good time to buy. All right. Maybe this isn't terrible. Oh, by the way, I can buy down my rate to a reasonable rate. So here we're going to talk about seller concessions, paragraph 12A. This is what paragraph 12A actually looks like in the 1 to 4 family contract. All right. But bottom line, this right here, in the past 12 to 18 months, I have left that zero in order for my buyers to get their offer accepted. Right. I'm like, you're going to have the cash to pay for that. Like, if you put any amount right here, you're going to lose every single time. Right. But now, I mean, we're seeing people, even on the MLS, I'm sure you've seen it, where seller is offering $15,000 to cover closing costs and all that. So that's where this would go. Mark, can you talk to us a little bit about seller concessions and what we can do with that and how to best utilize that? And let's say a 2-1 buy down or just seller concessions in general.
Yeah, definitely. And we have so many conversations going on, in the mortgage industry. I was going to address a few of the things you already talked about. A builder is partnered with a lender that is just a mortgage company like all the other mortgage companies, and they usually just have a partner. So if they're offering incentives, they've gotten with their partner and they've decided that they can give a little here, but it's all the same exact rules and guidelines that any other mortgage company goes by. It's just now that, prices are going down. You're seeing the builders have, they basically have a platform and they have all these lists to send out things to, but sellers are doing the same thing, just like the builders. So just, new builds have incentives. We can get those same incentives from sellers. So you could look at it like that. So there's always that option, and the other thing is it's always a good time to buy a house. Like for whatever reason, a person needs to buy a house is a really good investment. People get really into the interest rate part of it. But as you saw in that previous slide, the interest rate is only so powerful. When you consider that the majority of homeowners usually have their home for only 7 years or less, if you were going to keep your home for 30 years, you can easily refinance it. You're not, that's why they say marry the house, date the interest rate. The interest rate is not the end all be all thing to be afraid of. And as we educate the buyers, we want to let them know that everything's exciting for a buyer about the current market, except for that interest rates have gone up, but everything else, it's better for them for the most part, right? I'm just checking, make sure I'm not muted because it's so silent.
No, you're good. Yep.
And so that's the biggest...
second fucking time. Day.
Oh.
I love dirt, dude. Love it.
Okay.
All right. I think it's back to you, Mark.
Yes. So
that was an awesome little break.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll add there. So I mean, the take home message overall is buyers should be excited about the change, and I don't think that we should be really getting into the minutia of if interest rates have gone up, this much or this much, because there's so much to talk about with them. And you can send your buyers to talk to, a mortgage person, and they'll help them, through all this. As far as seller concessions go, now that sellers are willing to do incentives, just like the builders, then there's different ways to look at it. So before, a seller could just pay for the closing costs of a buyer. Okay. Now that's the least powerful way for a seller to contribute. Sometimes they would say, hey, we're going to lower the purchase price $20,000. Well, if a seller is able to pay even half of that to lower the buyer's interest rate, they can do a permanent buy down. And I want to talk a little bit about what buy downs look like. Okay. I don't think I can share my screen on a buy down, but for all lenders on any given day, you have a rate sheet. So the people in the company that determine all of the financial of the company, they create a rate sheet for that day. And sometimes it's changing hourly, depending on the market. Okay. So that rate sheet says, okay, here's the highest rate that costs the least amount of money for the buyer. So what we would call a par rate. So let's just say right now, the national average par rate is right at 6.957%, because we had a terrible last 2 days. And so imagine that then they say, okay, 6.95, 6.75 is going to cost this, 6.5 is going to cost this, 6.375, 6.25, and it just goes all the way up the sheet. And there's a certain amount of what we call discount points that can buy down the rate to a certain point. At some point, it's no longer beneficial for the lender to even do business on that loan at some point. So you can only buy down so much, maybe 2.5 points, maybe you could get to 3 points some days, but it depends on what's going on in the market, right? And Tony asked me this question earlier, is there like a formula that, okay, if I want to buy the interest rate down one full interest rate point, 6.95 to 5.95, is that a standard cost? And the answer is no. It varies from lender to lender, and it varies from day to day. Okay. So the seller could say, you know what, I'm going to offer you X amount of money. You could talk with your seller, or the agent could talk with the seller and say, how much would we want to offer? And they could advertise that. And then, or if you're the buyer, you could just ask for, hey, we'd like $10,000 to buy down the rate. That's going to be very powerful for the buyer compared to just lowering the purchase price even $20,000. Okay. So then that's the first way to buy down, is you're buying down permanently for the entire 30 years. Now, a less expensive way for the seller to help the buyer is the 2-1 buy down. Okay. So the way the 2-1 buy down works is the seller is basically going to pay a certain amount of money that allows the lender to collect on the first year of the loan. If they're at 6.95 for their loan, let's just say they go in at the par rate. For the first entire year, they're going to get 4.95 as their interest rate. And the second full year, they're going to get 5.95 as their interest rate. And then in the third year, they go to 6.95 for the rest of the loan. Now, how much does that cost? All the simple calculation is if you take what the payment would be at 6.95 and what the payment's going to be at 4.95, and you subtract that difference times 12 is how much the seller pays for that first year. You do the same thing for the second year. So it's going to be less of a difference, right? Because now we're an interest rate point higher. That times 12, add those two complete totals together, and that's how much the 2-to-1 buy down costs the seller. And it turns out to be cheaper than a permanent buy down. So that's why it became a better option. And actually, the buyer saves a significant amount of money over the first 2 years. I mean, we're talking maybe on a $500,000 loan amount, maybe $500 a month on the first year, and maybe $250 a month the second year. And I've been calculating, it's usually about 2% of the purchase price. So on a $500,000 home, it's probably going to cost in the ballpark of $10,000 to do the 2-to-1 buy down. Does that help? Does that make sense on how that works?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm just glad that we're recording this so we can all go back and go, wait a second, pause. let me work through that. But no, I think you did a great job of explaining that. So it sounds to me like the 2-1 buy down is a cheaper option for the seller and saves more money to the buyer.
It saves more money up front. And so and the reason why that's important is because, we're all the experts as far as that I follow, they're anticipating that, yeah, we're going to be in this a little bit higher rate environment for another year probably. But as there's lots to talk about of how all this works, and love to do that with anybody. But as the Fed raises the Fed fund rate, they're trying to curb inflation. And as demand, overall in the economy goes down, inflation's going to go down, and therefore interest rates are going to come back down. And that's probably going to take another year or so.
Yeah.
Most of us are anticipating that even by next summer, the market's going to pick up and things are going to be better.
Exactly. I was going to hit on that. Thank you for touching on that. But also just to kind of reconfirm this, because when I first heard about this 2-1 buy down, I was like, yeah, but I'm sure you're stuck in the loan for like 4 years because they got to make their money and blah, 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 but from briefly talking to you about it the other day, pretty much if it comes down in a year from now, you could refinance and move it into a locked rate at whatever that rate is, correct?
Definitely. Even most conventional loans, which are most conforming loans, which go by the guidelines from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, conventional FHA, VA, USDA, you can refinance within 6 months usually, as long as you've met certain criteria. And doing the 2-1 buy down does not affect that at all. So it doesn't add any more restrictions on when you can refinance.
Now, I love this because, like I said, I have a listing coming up and she wants to price it a little high. And before we start dropping the price, we might come in and go, hey, we're willing to give you this closing cost and help with that.
And what a lender can do is do a property specific little flyer that'll just take your exact, your purchase price and like show a little example of what that's going to do to the payment so you can advertise that.
Oh, I love that. I'll probably be calling you for that for sure.
Yeah,
that's great information. Does anybody have a question for Mark? I think Mark's going to have to take off here in a little bit for an appointment. Does anybody want to unmute, ask any question regarding that?
I have a question. So if the seller's offering that for the 2-in-1 buy down, would that be put on the what is it called, on the 12A? Would you put on their 2-for-1 buy down?
Well, basically, you would put probably the amount that the seller's going to pay there in that, and then with the lender, they would work out the 2-1 buy down details.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the lender will give you the price if we,
Yeah,
if we need to put the price in there, the lender will do that part. Okay.
right. The total amount of the seller concessions, if they're just doing the 2-1 buy down, so it'd just be that total would go there in the contract in that spot.
Cool.
Okay.
I was
Awesome.
going to say one quick thing, because I know that
Yeah.
this is, I feel like it's helpful because, there's so much talk about the interest rates and changing and everything, but what the interest rates really follow from a day-to-day basis is what's called mortgage-backed securities and the 10-year treasury note. Those two things fluctuate daily. And so the mortgage market fluctuates with those every day. There's a lot of other factors that are, I would say, underlying factors of why those two things change. But like when somebody says we had a terrible last 2 days, it's because somebody said something like just last week when Jerome Powell of the Fed tend to, his words were a little bit more negative towards what's going to happen. Well, that caused the mortgage-backed security market to get scared, and those went down. So therefore rates follow that and go up the very next day. So it's just a little a balancing act every single day.
Yeah. Well, cool. No, I appreciate you sharing that info with us. I know I'm still processing it and going, okay, this is making more sense. And I think it's definitely a tool that we can use that I would say if professional realtors like ourselves are still wrapping our head around it, just think about the general public has no idea about this, what they can do to offset these rising interest rates. So again, it goes back to us being the professional and educating our people of like, hey, yes, they're higher, but lenders have gotten creative and it's all legit. You're not screwing you over here. This is really how we can utilize these types of programs to get you in a house now, before prices continue to go up. So again, Mark, if you need to run, you're welcome to obviously stay for the whole thing. Don't have much more to go, but I just really appreciate you being here, taking time to explain all of that. If any of y'all, Mark, do you mind just hopping in the chat real quick and maybe dropping your phone number in there? If anybody wants to reach out, just go ahead and drop your maybe phone number, email, so that everybody can save that and reach out if they have any other questions.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that while you're here, continuing on.
Yeah, awesome. So
thanks
the
for
other
having
one,
me, Tony.
What's that?
Thanks for having me on to
Yeah,
talk.
yeah, absolutely. First time, but won't be the last. So we'll get you back on here soon. But new build incentives, say yes, turn on your mic and say yes if you've been seeing a bunch of emails with new builds begging you to come back. Even like Lennar, believe it or not, is offering what, like 4 or 5% after they screwed us for a long time. But right here, these are just a few that I've found in the past couple of days in my email. I just took screenshots, but here's one, Ashton Woods. All right, $20,000 towards closing costs, design options, home site premiums. The choice is yours. Check out our latest price drops. Here's one from DR Horton, up to 5%. I can't wait to land one of these. Right, I've heard like mythical stories when I first started, like, oh yeah, new builds used to offer 5-6%. I'm like, that's crazy. So I've never experienced it. So I'm looking forward to trying to close one of these here soon to take advantage of it. Can you imagine like selling a DR Horton or a Pulte or whatever, a Lennar, and getting like 5-6%? Like that, I think that'd be pretty badass. But here's a Syntex. Over here, you can see the price drops across the board, 6%, 6%, 6%, and obviously like this is like inventory that's ready to go. So not only are people getting a new build home with all of the warranties, right, attached to that, but they can move in like next month and be look, even October. So these are all right there. Of course, I'm over here in Sterling Ridge, and I couldn't believe I signed. I did not pay this much for my house, by the way. I signed in April of 2021, at about 100,000 less than this. So I just kept on seeing the equity go up and up and up and up. And now it's kind of calmed down, obviously. But yeah, 4%, 6%, all over the place here. But those are just some of the things that I'm sure all of us are seeing. I just want to wrap up here. And like, we got to take action, right? And I think this is what's going to separate the people that are still doing this in a year or two and the people that aren't, right? Like, think about all of the people that got into the business and it was easy, and everybody kind of made money. But now, like, we have to go back to grinding it out, and putting in our time and, doing our Facebook marketplace ads and talking to our people and doing our emails, doing our mailers. And maybe there's a little bit of time in between closings, but hang in there and, like, you control the narrative, right? This is time to double down. Grant Cardone, if you haven't listened to Grant Cardone's book, of course, 10X, but I think the better one is If You're Not First, You're Last. Has anybody in here ever read or listened to If You're Not First, You're Last by Grant Cardone? Mark says yes. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Even if you just listen to the first 2 or 3 chapters, he has some great stuff talking about going through recession and, like, when everybody's shutting down and pulling back, it's time for you to double down in your actions, and taking more action. So you control it, make more content, educate your database, prepare real estate reviews. My wife and I's goal is we're going to hit all of our people by the end of the year. In the next couple months, everybody that we know is going to know exactly how much their house costs, right? What they could sell for. So everybody's going to have a real estate review going into 2023 and going, damn, I still have a lot of equity in this. All right. Love on your database. We were planning on doing an event, maybe 2. Show them the numbers, because numbers don't lie, right? If you literally show them, like, this is what has sold, this is what it sold for, this is how long it took to sell, there's no rebuttal to that. It's like, well, yep, I guess that's accurate, right? And then just get in front of your people and serve them, right? Touch base with them, love on them, and they will love you. All right. So I hope you took something out of that today. Do we have any questions? Pretty short, pretty to the point. Do we have any questions in the room regarding any of this information?
Hey, Tony, I have a couple little follow-up points since I haven't left yet.
Yeah.
One of them is that I love Grant Cardone's books because Grant Cardone is the narrator. If you're into, like, audiobooks, and he's really motivating and fun to listen to. So, like, for that alone, I mean, that's a good book to get just for playing in your car, is the If You're Not First, You're Last, because he's hilarious. He'll just go off text and start talking about stuff. And anyway, he's a good person to get familiar with.
Diggity dog. Let's go at it. Diggity dog. We always finish like, let's go. And he's a great one. I don't believe in he's a little bit more aggressive than I am as a personality, but his material is great, and take it. And I was talking to my wife about this, and I'll tell you guys, like, go follow more realtors, like, not just everybody, but, like, find people that you go, ooh, I like that content, and literally rip it off. Like, I've been making a list of, like, okay, this person did a short TikTok video on the process of buying. Guess what? I should probably have a video on my page of the process of buying. All right. And even these big people, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. The big guy in Canada that does a whole bunch of attraction, the purple Lamborghini. Mike Sherrard. Like, Mike Sherrard is like, go rip off everything, right? So, like, there's a bunch of Glenda Baker is a really good follow. Byron Lazine is a really good follow. And go follow those people and just start ripping off their content and put out more content, right? Preferably in video. But even I've done the reels to where I just take pictures from the MLS, turn them into a movie, and put it into a reel, because I get more views on the reels than just pictures. right? So get creative, do that. Yeah, I can definitely share the slides here. Just want to point out real quick, Mark Koehl at Legacy Mutual Mortgage is 210-876-1996, and mark.koehl at legacymutual.com. If you don't have that, I have it. Feel free to reach out to me. And yes, we'll share these slides. So every Thursday we record this. So I'm going to stop this recording and then I'll upload it to the Productive Agents group. So if you're on Facebook and you're not a member of that yet, literally type in The Productive Agent. It'll pop up as a private group. I will accept anybody and everybody. Doesn't matter what brokerage you're with. And this material will be shared there. Quick plug, guys. I would really appreciate you going to check out the podcast. So we've been doing this group for about a year. We're up to like 230 something people in the group. But we just started about a month ago doing the podcast. Every week, we just interviewed Alan Grulick in our group. A couple weeks ago, we did Mark Chambers. And then I have similar material that I record. I did a whole one on mindset and controlling the mind. So go check out the podcast. It's called The Productive Agent. It's on all podcast channels, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And I post that weekly as well. So I appreciate all of y'all being here. Super excited that we have some new faces in the crowd. So that's super cool. Please come back, invite a friend, share this, and help us grow as a community. I do this because I found a need to educate my agents that I was bringing in. And then it's just blossomed from there. And I come from an education background and I love doing it. I just love putting this material together. Most of it is for you and everybody that tunes in. But honestly, a lot of this is for me going, hey, Tony, pull your shit together and do these things that you're telling everybody else to do. So it kind of keeps me in check as well. So that's part of the reason that I like it. So again, if we don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up and end this recording, and feel free to reach out anytime. Again, thank you for being here, guys.